bigcal, welcome to my world, and welcome to the final video of Dragon Questober III. What better way to end Dragon Questober III than doing a video on none other than Dragon Warrior 3 for the Nintendo Entertainment System. And Dragon Quest 3 on the Super Famicom. And back to Dragon Warrior 3 on the Game Boy Color. And then Dragon Quest 3 on the Nintendo Switch. First released in Japan in 1988, and then 4 years later in North America, and then almost 30 years later here in the UK, Dragon Quest III The Seeds of Salvation is a continued evolution of the godfather of JRPGs, Dragon Quest. But is it any good? Let's take a look and find out. The game opens up with a cutscene of some hero battling with a dragon on top of a volcano, and after a while, both seemingly fall to their death. You are then woken up by your mum on your 16th birthday and informed that today's the day you get to visit the castle and talk to the king. It's here that you find out that the hero at the start of the game was Ortega, your father, and you must now take on the mantle of hero and journey out to defeat the evil Baramos. The first major change for Dragon Quest III over the other games is made apparent right at the very start with party members. You're not travelling alone, similar to Dragon Quest II. However, this time around you get to choose your party members, customise them and have at least 3 more in your party, with more in reserves if you want. There's also some changes to how they work as well. With Dragon Quest II, you as the hero were very skilled as a warrior, but could use 0 magic. You then had another party member who was a very good magic user, but had very terrible physical attack power. And then a third character who was in the middle, decent attack power, decent at magic. It was well balanced, but still not perfect. Here though, we get the introduction of classes. Louisa, known as Patty in future versions, the owner of the tavern that also doubles as a recruitment office, will give you a handful of randomly generated party members to choose from. This is fine, but you will definitely want to go upstairs and create your own party members instead. Like your main hero, you get to choose between male and female, name them anything you want as long as it fits, and unlike the hero, decide on a class. These are Soldier. Strong physical attacks, but very slow and learns no magic. However, they can equip the most weapons and armour out of any class. Pilgrim. A magic user focused on healing and buffs, has access to a moderate number of weapons and armour, but not very skilled attack-wise. Wizard. A magic user focused on attacking spells. Unfortunately has a poor choice of weapons and armour and is less physically damaging than a pilgrim. Fighter. Similar to a soldier but with less physical strength and way more speed, but it also balances out with the fact that they have a high chance of crits in later levels. Merchant. Earns more money after battles and can appraise items to give you more information on them. Physically weaker than most of the other classes and learns no magic attacks, but will level up faster than other classes. Goof Off. Completely useless outside of its high luck stat, which mostly prevents it from falling to spells like sleep, and can increase the chances of gaining an item after a battle. Honestly, they only become useful at level 20, more on that later. My personal recommendation for your party is to avoid the merchant and absolutely the goof-off classes, and make sure you have a pilgrim in there for a healer. Then you can pick any 2 out of the 3 remaining choices, which are a soldier, a fighter and a wizard. Any combination of those is going to be fine for your first playthrough. Obviously you can add to the difficulty of the game by choosing those worse classes, and you will get more out of the game that way if you want a hard challenge. But yeah, just stick to the good ones for now if it's your first time playing. With your customised party complete, it's time to set off on a journey to save the world. And for me, I think the game can be divided up into multiple sections, which we're going to go through one at a time. The very first task in your journey to save the world is to climb Najima Tower in order to obtain the Thief's Key. You'll learn about its location from a prisoner in Aliahan Castle, who claims it was stolen from him. This is a pretty fun quest to start off with, as it involves exploration on the small island that you live on, while making sure you talk to NPCs to condition you to always talk to them every time you meet them, in hopes of gaining new information on where to go and what to do. This has always been a part of the Dragon Quest series up to this point, however I feel Dragon Quest III does it a lot better than the previous games. Things are a little more clearer. You're not going to need to look up a guide to find out where to go next, except for a very few times in the later game. The exploration part is also very fun here, as the tower is visible from Aliahan, but it's on its own tiny island, forcing you to wander around and figure out how to access it. Once you've climbed the tower, levelling up along the way, and talked to the old man, you'll finally get the key, allowing you to open certain doors. Again, talking to the new NPCs you can access thanks to the key, you'll learn more about your next task. In this case, finding the magic ball that can blow up walls, needed to access the first of many portals that will take you to new locations. Next is the magic key, which is technically straightforward. However, there are some optional side quests, as it were, that you can complete along the way. Now, the NES version doesn't tell you that these are optional, and in fact they are changed in future versions so that some of them are not optional and you do have to complete them in order to progress the game later on. But here in the NES version, completely optional. For speed running, great, missed them out. But for just having pure fun playing the game, boring. If you do just want to get the key though, you simply have to travel around this new continent that you end up travelling to through the portal to find an Egyptian-based town complete with a pyramid. Inside the pyramid is a basic puzzle to solve, and when done, you'll have the magic key. Getting through the pyramid without gaining levels will be tough though, which is why those optional quests are always a good idea. One of them involves climbing another tower to defeat a thief who has stolen the crown of the King of Romilly, and another involves searching a cave for a ruby in order to wake up an entire village cursed by fairies. Optional? Yes. Worth doing? Absolutely. As well as gaining levels, making your party stronger to help with the future battles, it also adds to the world building and makes your journey feel that much bigger. In order to get the final key, literally known in the NES version as the final key, you will need a ship. The King of Portoga has one, and seems very willing to hand it over to you, on one condition: bring him some black pepper. However, only one town seems to sell the stuff, and getting to it requires going through a cave which is blocked off, and only a mean gnome can get you through. Shockingly, he won't, until you present him with a letter from the King of Portoga, who happens to be a friend of his. This might surprise you, but when you reach the one town that sells black pepper, you can't simply buy it. The daughter of the owner has been kidnapped and her fiancé goes to try and get her back, but never returns. This leaves you to venture to the kidnapper's cave, where you'll run into a certain someone from one of the optional quests. This is one of the changes in the future versions where they make the quest no longer optional, so if you didn't do it, you won't be able to complete this quest until you do. Defeating the kidnappers will earn you some free black pepper, and upon returning to Portoga and delivering it to the king, you now have access to a ship. This is where the game really opens up, though technically at this point you only need to visit 3 specific locations. Talking to NPCs will point you in the right direction, however without prior knowledge of where to go and what to do, you could be wandering around aimlessly for quite a while at this point in the game. Without going into too much detail, you'll need an item to turn you invisible, so you can enter a castle and complete a puzzle to get the Vase of Drought. Then, using the vase at a particular spot in the sea, you can essentially scoop up a ton of seawater, uncover a shrine, and access the final key. As I have mentioned, getting the final key can be a bit of a pain if you don't know exactly where to go. However, Dragon Quest III does a great job at not making you feel like you aren't accomplishing anything just because you don't happen to know where one particular thing is. With the ship giving you access to most of the world, you are indeed free to wander around, explore new lands and visit new towns. The final key does a nice job of blocking off some of the more tougher areas, so while there are 2 locations I suggest avoiding until you are a higher level, you can still deal with most of the monsters around the world and still indeed progress part of the game without the final key. In fact, you'll gain more information on the location of the key and the items needed to locate it in various towns you can come across, so exploration continues to be a big part of the game. When you do finally get the final key, you can now access almost every part of the game, and that leads us to the next section. On your journey around the world, you'll hear talk of 6 orbs being needed to reach Baramos, which does sound similar to a certain Dragon Quest XI game that came out just a few years back. So yeah, the next part of the game is all about finding those orbs. Some of them can be found before you get the final key, though ironically enough I wouldn't recommend going after those 2 until you are a much higher level, something you can achieve by saving them for last and levelling up along the way to finding the others first. The bulk of the game is this section right here, looking for the 6 orbs, and I had an absolute blast doing it because it's not just a case of going into a town, finding an orb, leaving and going to the next town. There are different ways to collect all of them. One of them is just buried near a pirate den. One can only be obtained at night from a ghost. One requires you to have a merchant in your party to help set up a brand new town, eventually leading to the discovery of an orb. Don't worry, you can create one specifically for the quest. Do not part with one that has been in your party. One has you take part in a trial as the hero on his own, and then 2 require beating strong bosses, though both are done in different ways from each other. I love these 2 in particular in the way that they are done, especially the one in Japan, which obviously is based on Japan, and it involves doing a quest that may seem very familiar to you if you've played Dragon Quest XI, and Dragon Quest XI being one of my favourite games of all time, yeah, I love how that referenced the original here in Dragon Quest III. The final orb, I don't believe you can do until you've done all the other ones, but it basically involves you finding multiple items, trading them around, getting hold of a sword, throwing the sword into a fucking volcano, and then accessing a new location so you can finally find the final orb. Crazy, fun, total blast. With all 6 orbs collected, you must take them to a shrine where they will light fires that can heat up an egg, granting you the ability to fly via Ramia, the legendary bird we come to know as Emperia in later games. The ship gave you access to almost the entire world map, but now with Ramia, you have true freedom to go anywhere, including the handful of places blocked off by mountains. Which brings us to the next section of the game. There is a good chance you've seen Baramos' castle up to this point, but you've been unable to access it due to it being on a small island, inaccessible via ship, and surrounded by mountains. this is where Ramia comes involved, and you can fly over those mountains, land right outside the castle, begin exploring on your way to battling the Archfiend himself. So, spoiler, which I'm going to have to spoil later in the game anyway, Baramos isn't the final boss, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. However, he might be the hardest fight between the two, one that took me a good while to finally vanquish after numerous attempts at fighting him and a lot of time grinding up levels. He has some insane attacks that will deal over 100 damage points for each character at a time, followed up with the ability to hit more than once per turn. You need to have 2 party members at certain levels at the very least, so you can have access to certain reviving and healing magics, otherwise you won't stand a chance. Grinding in the castle area is the best place to grind at this point in the game because they are the strongest monsters, and you can run into metal babbles, which we know as liquid metal slimes these days. They don't give nearly the amount of experience that they would in later games, but you do get around 10,200 or something, which is very useful at this stage in the game. However, I do have a slight problem with grinding in this area, and I can't believe I'm having this issue. There aren't enough random encounters here. Baffling, I know, but the one part of the game where you want to encounter tons and tons of monsters to battle and gain experience and level up before you fight this big bad boss, you just spend half the time wandering about waiting for a random encounter, which contradicts every other part of the game where there are just constant random encounters. It is crazy. There is a weapon that you can get for the fighter which increases random encounters throughout the game. Getting it is incredibly difficult. I did do it in the NES version. In the future versions they remove the random encounter aspect of the item, so you don't get as many still, so it's kind of pointless. But yeah, even with that, I wasn't running into nearly enough enemies, and it took me longer than it should have to level up in order to defeat Baramos. But defeat Baramos I did, and I was immensely satisfied in doing so, even if the hero and main character died right before the final blow. Your journey then has come to an end. You return home to Aliahan and speak to the king, only for the castle to shake and no doubt an evil sounding voice inform you that he, Zoma, is in fact the greatest evil and the mastermind behind Baramos and will soon turn your world to darkness. I guess that means you have to take on another boss, so it's time for the final section of the game. Zoma isn't located anywhere in the world, however. He's in the world of darkness, the underworld, literally the world beneath the one you've been exploring. In order to access this, you have to jump down into the Pit of Geiger, which can be seen right next to Baramos's castle, so again you do need Ramia to fly there to get you there. Once you do, you fall down, you end up in this world of darkness, and if you were expecting some kind of hellscape in there, you might be surprised. In fact, it looks oddly familiar. That's because it's Alefgard, the world from the first game and part of the second game. Unlike the second game though, everything is here for you to explore once again, only some things seem a little different. Tantagil Castle isn't a separate location from the town of Breckenary. Hawksness is no longer in ruins. Cantlin doesn't seem to have a giant golem keeping guard. And the swamp cave where the princess was being held captive by the green dragon isn't even complete yet. Why? Simple. We're in the past. Yes, we finally realise that this game is a prequel to the first Dragon Quest game, the legendary hero Erdrick that we talked about in Dragon Quest 1. That's us! Now! We're going through his journey. So that is a really cool way to connect these games together and not simply do another sequel like in the vein of Dragon Quest II. Assuming you've played the original game already, everything you need to do here is very similar. Obtain the Stone of Sun, Staff of Rain, the Fairy Flute, the Silver Harp if you want to exploit a money glitch, which I happily did, as well as the Sacred Amulet from Rubis herself in order to obtain the Rainbow Drop to open up the bridge to Zoma's castle, similar to how you would for the Dragon Lord's castle in previous games. Things are done in a different order and in slightly different locations, but as long as you do visit everywhere, you shouldn't have an issue finding what you need. You can even find armour and a shield that will eventually become the legendary pieces of equipment from the first game, and with a little effort, obtain a sword too, with the help of some people from your world who escaped into Alefgard some time ago. Searching for the 6 orbs was definitely my favourite part of the game, however this is a very close second. Being able to explore the entire world from the first game in full this time, not the weird version from Dragon Quest II where you only had a handful of towns to visit and there wasn't much there. Here the game is opened up fully, except there are slight changes to locations, like I said, such as Hawksnest not being devastated by the Dragon Lord because he doesn't exist yet, and this new town adds a new key item that you need to create the sword, so they add it into the story very nicely. Just a ton of nostalgia for the first game playing through this, and yeah, a lot of fun. Something that I keep saying, but yeah, this game is just a lot of fun. After basically replaying Dragon Quest I here, and unlocking the bridge to the castle, it's time to take on the final boss, Zoma. Or at least you will once you navigate his castle. Along the way, you'll spy a King Hydra battling some warrior, who turns out to be Ortega, your father. There have been plenty of hints along the way that he survived falling into the volcano, and that he was here. But then you were told he drowned trying to get to Zoma's castle. You watch on as he and the Hydra go at it, but eventually the Hydra defeats Ortega, and with his last breath asks if you could inform his family what happened here, as unfortunately, he doesn't know who you are. Saving the world was your main motivation up to this point, but now you can add revenge to your list of why you want to bring back light and peace. Continue to the final floor of the castle and get ready for some crazy fights. First up is the King Hydra that killed your father. By this point in the game, you should be around level 40-ish, and with the best weapons, shields and armour available to you, this won't be much of a problem. Thankfully, you can heal up between battles between all of these sub-bosses, so you're not going into each battle completely drained of health, hopefully. So obviously you can cast healing spells in between, but one of the big things is a key item that you can get in Zoma's castle, the Sage Stone. This can only be used within battle, however, when you do use it in battle, it will cast Heal All, or Multi-Heal, and it will basically heal everybody by about 70 to 90 HP, which is fantastic and completely free and saves all of your MP for if you need to use it for healing spells outside of battle in between the battles. Confusing? Maybe the way I put it, but it is very simple. If you die at any point during these battles or against Zoma, you have to come back to the castle, you will have to battle everybody again, which can be a bit of a pain but should be manageable. Anyway, the next boss that you battle after the King Hydra is Baramos. Again! I think technically it's Baramos's soul, but yeah, it's kind of hard to tell with how they name it in the NES version. Baramos here can be a pain again, as he casts Explode, which does major damage to every one of your party members. Luckily, using the Sage Stone, you can get all that free healing, plus if you cast Increase to increase your defense, you'll be minimising the damage taken. Just keep hitting him and he'll go down fairly easy. After that, we have Baramos's skeleton, basically. Not sure what it translates to in future versions, but yeah, you're basically facing his skeleton. This time he'll only hit once per round, I think, or it's the other way around, and the previous time he only hit once. Yeah, he will hit very hard. I'm talking about 150 damage points if he will land a shot. You can again minimise this with increase, keep up your healing spells and using the stage stone, and with any luck you'll get through this again, no problems. All leading up to Zoma. This battle can go one of two ways. One is incredibly difficult, and two, not too bad, but considerably easier. If you paid attention to the NPCs and obtained a particular item known as the Sphere of Light. So this item, if you remember from the original Dragon Quest game, I believe you get from beating the Dragon Lord, and that's what's used to restore light to the land. Here though, use it as an item in battle, the very first chance you get, and it will essentially remove the dark aura from Zoma, allowing his spells to be decreased in power and for his defense to go down as well, so you can hit him much harder. Without this, you will have a hell of a time trying to beat him if you're around level 40ish like I was. Zoma will hit hard even after his aura has been removed, and sometimes multiple times per round, and sometimes with an ice attack to hit all party members. The biggest pain that he uses though is a spell to remove any stat buffs, forcing you to continue casting defense and attack increases, which can be annoying, as well as taking up any opportunities to heal. After around 10 whole minutes, I finally did it, and honestly, other than being time consuming, I found it fairly easy, certainly compared to the original Baramos fight. With Zoma defeated, his castle begins to crumble and you fall down a pit, eventually ending up in the cave near Tantageal Castle. All the celebrations go on and everything's happy and wonderful. The light has been restored to Alefgard, but unfortunately the huge gaping hole in the sky that you fell down to get here has closed up, and you are now trapped outside of your world. We get some text that explain that after the celebrations ended, the hero simply vanished, leaving behind only his equipment, which Alefgard now treasures as legendary items going into Dragon Quest I. What a game. What a game. In case you haven't guessed, I loved Dragon Quest III. It definitely is the right step in the evolutionary terms of Dragon Quest. Dragon Quest I was on a small scale, but still very fun. Dragon Quest II increased things immensely, but that final half of the game where it just turns into one big grindy slog really made my enjoyment plummet, and in the end I just wasn't that excited to keep playing the game. Dragon Quest III on the other hand just takes all of the good from those two games, makes it better, and throws away any of the bad. It's just fantastic. Right from the start, it throws custom party members and classes at you, allowing for a unique experience almost every time you play the game. The large world is probably not that much bigger than in Dragon Quest II, but I found it much easier to navigate and much more enjoyable in general to explore. Each town and area have more personality to it, with them all being based on real-life locations such as Rome, Egypt, and even Japan. Most of them have their own little story going on, some being optional and some being needed to get a key item. These are the things that pretty much every modern JRPG does, but at the time this was all new and just added to the world building that further helped immerse you into the game world. A ship was a great addition to Dragon Quest II, but adding Ramia and the ability to fly around in Dragon Quest III opens up the world even more. Plus there is the fact that you get to travel much faster by flying, and there are no random encounters. So during that time where you're simply going from probably a Leohan, where you can heal up for free, and then travelling to Baramos's castle to attempt to fight him or level up, you don't get interrupted with random monster encounters that, take up HP and MP just getting from point A to point B. Much, much easier to do, and much more fun to fly around as well. The only issue is that Ramia does not come with you to Alifgard, but that area is much smaller, and having a ship in that area is much nicer this time around. With the addition of classes, the list of spells has increased too, adding in multiple ice-based attacks, giving enemies certain elemental weaknesses now. Zoom is probably the biggest improvement here spell-wise, as it no longer limits you to just returning to the last place you saved, but instead gives you a list of all previously visited locations to choose from, making travelling around much, much easier if you need to return anywhere to drop off an item or buy from a specific shop. Spells aren't the only thing that classes affect, as weapons and armour are more abundant thanks to not only class-specific equipment, but also gender-specific. Something that I didn't mention earlier though was the ability to change classes. What would eventually become known as the All Trades Abbey, the Shrine of Dharma will let you change the class of any party member outside of the hero, as long as they are at least level 20. One of the reasons you'll want to do this is to combine stats of two different character classes. So say you have a soldier, hits very hard but is incredibly slow. So you can combine him and change classes with a warrior. He'll keep that great strength, which will be more than a warrior typically would have had, but will now start to increase in speed as well. Or, because like the soldier doesn't have any magic attacks, combine him with the wizard. Now you have the strength of a soldier with the magic ability of the wizard. Very, very cool. But there is one major reason you will absolutely want to change classes, and that is the Sage. The Sage is only available with a special item that you can find in a tower near Dharma, and I think only the Pilgrim can use it. Basically, a Sage combines the healing abilities of a Pilgrim with the offensive magic of a wizard, and adds in a little bit more defense and attack as well. I do not recommend that you continue your journey at this point in the game without getting a Sage. Their healing spells are essential to the later parts in the game. The one thing though with changing classes is that they will revert back to level 1, which can be a bit of a pain, but for the most part they will level up very quickly. Though the Sage, being the first and only advanced class, does take a little bit longer to level up than any other class within the game. Luckily, the Dragon Quest III does think of this, and the area around the Shrine of Dharma has the chance to land metal slimes. Yes, we don't have the metal babbles yet at this part of the game, but metal slimes that will give you, I think, 2,000 experience points. Very, very handy, especially when they're such low levels after changing classes. Obviously, you don't want to change everybody's class at the same time, otherwise you'll end up with your hero at a decent level and everybody else at level 1, and they will probably die trying to level up. So just do it once or twice. I wouldn't recommend messing about too much with it, because while leveling up can be a little bit quicker with the metal slimes here, it will still take some time to get those characters back up to roughly the same level as everybody else. Oh, before I forget, remember the Goof-Off class, that completely useless thing that doesn't have any good attacks or abilities, and it can only really have high luck stat? Yeah, at level 20, it can become a Sage without that one-time use item that you have to find in order to get your Pilgrim to a Sage. So yeah, at level 20 it can become incredibly useful. Unfortunately, you have to have a Goof-Off in your party long enough to get him to level 20, and that's just really, really bad. Plus, I don't really feel you need 2 Sages within your party. I've done it multiple times with only 1 Sage and not really had much of an issue. Item management was always an issue in the first 2 games, only being improved in future versions. However, Dragon Quest III begins those improvements on the NES version. Firstly, between 4 party members now you have plenty of space, with one whole character extra than Dragon Quest II. However, if you find yourself needing more items and have some that are just taking up space, the first bank is available. You can of course store gold here so you don't lose it should you fall in battle, but you can also store items. However, items will require a small payment to withdraw them, so keep that in mind as you're storing something away. Take everything I mentioned and combine it and you get Dragon Quest III, which in my opinion is one of the best JRPGs on the Nintendo Entertainment System. But as good as the NES version is, it's not the best. Which is why I'm going to talk about the other versions of it right now. As with Dragon Quest 1 and 2, Dragon Quest 3 did indeed get a Super Famicom port, a Game Boy Color port, and a Nintendo Switch port, which is the mobile phone versions. However, unlike Dragon Quest 1 and 2, which were bundled together, Dragon Quest 3 is all on its own, and it even uses a much superior game engine to Dragon Quest 1 and 2 on the Super Famicom. Now it gets to use the awesome Dragon Quest 6 engine, which makes things look and sound and play way better. The Super Famicom version is, without a doubt, the best version. The new visuals just look so much better than what Dragon Quest 1 and 2 got on the same system, breathing new life into an already excellent game. This version adds in a completely new class, the Thief, as well as personality types that will affect how each party member's stats increase upon levelling up. The hero's personality is determined at the start of the game with a brand new section, where Rubis, the creator of Alifgard, asks you a handful of questions. Depending on your answers, you will then enter a little scenario, where what you do will help determine your personality type. Some of these scenarios can have many different outcomes within them, each leading to a separate personality. When it comes to party members, their personality is determined by how you attribute the 5 stat seeds you are given when they are created. Luckily, if you aren't happy with the personality types you get, you can change them via books that you find throughout the game. As for the new Thief class, they are pretty quick and not too bad physically in a battle. However, their main purpose is for helping find treasures, steal items from enemies, and lower the encounter rate with a spell. One of those treasures that the Thief can help you find are mini medals. While this is not their first appearance in a Dragon Quest game, it is the first time that we got them in any of the original trilogy, as they were not in Dragon Quest 1 and 2, even on the Super Famicom ports. Collecting these will give you items as you go down a well in Aliahan and you can trade them with the mini medal collector down there. Unfortunately, I never found the items that you get from him that good. Usually at that point in the game when you've got enough medals to trade in for an item, the item's worse than anything that you can buy at stores, so I just sell them for extra gold. It's nice to have. As a completionist, you've got a ton of medals to find in the game, but otherwise, it doesn't really matter. When it comes to equipment, the game of course has more than ever for you to spend your hard-earned gold on. Trouble storing it all though? Well, not anymore. The bank still remains, however it's purely for gold only, and instead it has been replaced with the bag. The bag is with you at all times and basically has unlimited storage. While you can't access any items in the bag during battles, it is extremely useful during the entire game, as items such as keys and orbs and anything else can still be used while inside the bag, saving you from moving them from party member to party member. Buying items and equipment is made a little bit easier now as you can choose a quantity, though you can still only go up to 9. But thanks to the bag being basically unlimited, if you were to buy say medicinal herbs, You have to buy 9 at a time, but you can keep buying and buying and buying until you fill the bag up with 99 of them. Very useful for the later parts in the game where you can just keep using these healing items rather than wasting MP on healing spells. In the previous Super Famicom remakes of Dragon Quest 1 and 2, the difficulty was brought down by quite a bit. When it comes to Dragon Quest III though, the difficulty on the NES version isn't that high. There was only really the Baramos fight that I had any trouble with, and I just had to grind a little bit more in order to defeat it. So there's not that much of a big change in difficulty here on the Super Famicom version. The big change is the speed. So much so that I had to put my Super Famicom cartridge into the Super Nintendo and play it for a little bit, just to see if the English translated ROM that I had hadn't increased the speed that wasn't already in the original version. Nope, it's there in the Super Famicom version. Going through towns and dungeons is incredibly quick. So much so that I shaved off around 10 hours of my gameplay time. Which I know seems like quite a lot as well, considering the times for the first 2 Dragon Quest games on the NES. When I played other versions, I shortened the time by about half. Here it's definitely not half, but 10 hours is still 10 hours. Though I still didn't take as long playing Dragon Quest III on the NES as I did Dragon Quest II on the NES. And Dragon Quest III is a bigger game. It was just a much easier and more enjoyable experience. Dragon Quest III, the Super Famicom version then, definitely in my opinion, the best version of the game. Now, if you can get the cartridge, like I said, it is in Japanese, so if you don't know Japanese, you're buggered. But you can get fan-translated cartridges. Like, I do have one, but I just didn't choose to play it. Instead, I just got a fan-translated ROM on the internet, played it through an emulator. Absolutely fine. Fantastic way to play it. And of course, we also got the Super Famicom version ported to the Game Boy Color. But is this version any good? Like with 1 and 2 on the original Game Boy, Dragon Quest III is indeed just a port of the Super Famicom version for the most part. Graphics and audio are downgraded to fit onto the system, though this time around less so as the game was a Game Boy Color exclusive, and not one of those double cartridges, so it was able to use more of the Game Boy Color's power. All in all, it's very impressive, and still a great way to play the game, especially as it has an official English release. Plus, it even has some exclusive content that has never been put into another version of the game. While mini medals are included in the Super Famicom game, here the Game Boy Color game has monster medals as well. These can be dropped randomly after a battle, and collecting them grants you access to an ice cave. And the more medals you collect, the more areas you can unlock and explore. Now, none of this is story based, so the only purpose of it is to continue going through all these different dungeons within the ice cave and battling one big post-game boss. Yes, the extra content being there is fantastic, and being on a handheld, probably a really good version to have, as you play it in your hand, you're not glued to a big TV screen at all times with the controller in your hand, stuck playing it there. You can take it anywhere with you. Unfortunately, I just did not see the point in doing this, because it would have taken me forever. I was on a bit of a schedule, time constraints and all, for trying to get this video done in time for Dragon Questober III, so I just didn't have the time to go around trying to collect all of these medals, going through the cave and beating the boss at the end. So yeah, but the fact it's there is fantastic. Lastly then, we have Dragon Quest III for the Nintendo Switch, which is of course the mobile version of the game that was ported onto the console. Here I have 1, 2 and 3 in a complete package on a cartridge that I got from PlayAsia that has the English language in it, otherwise you can only buy them digitally, and one at a time I believe. So I've already really talked about these games in previous videos, because while Dragon Quest 1 and 2, when it got ported to the Super Famicom, the Game Boy Color, they were together, and then Dragon Quest 3 was its own thing, so there was a lot more to talk about. When it comes to the Switch versions, I've already said everything about them basically in the previous videos. It's Dragon Quest 3, but with all the same additions and upgrades and features that were in Dragon Quest 1 and 2 on the Switch as well, so I don't want to go repeating myself over and over. I will just say that the music is still fantastic in this version, but the visual style of the 16-bit sprite work for the overworld and everything clashes still with the HD sprites or whatever of the party members and monster designs. It just doesn't look very well together at all. That said, it is still a perfectly fine playable version of the game that will take you around the same time as the Super Famicom and Game Boy Color versions to play. So if this one's the only version you can access, don't worry, it's still a perfectly fine way to play the game. It's still Dragon Quest III at its core and it's still awesome. It's just the visual styles do clash and not really a big fan of that. Now, some of you out there might be thinking that I've forgotten something. But don't worry, I haven't forgotten. I'm simply going to talk about it now. I've already talked about the Ice Cave, some exclusive content for the Game Boy Color, but all versions of the game after the NES release got some extra post-game content as well. If you indeed obtain the Sphere of Light to help defeat Zoma, then you'll need to return to that location in order to find this new content. From there you can ascend to the Sky World, which features a long and difficult set of dungeons based on locations you've already visited in Dragon Quest III, only with much more difficult monsters. Like, really difficult. All cards on the table, I did not go through this part of the game either, just like the Ice Cave. The monsters here are very powerful. In fact, there are some monsters that are basically Baramos, but more powerful. Yeah, and when you reach this part of the game, obviously you've defeated Zoma, you've gone through the credits, saved the game, and then loaded your save again. Now, you still have to defeat Zoma again on the save if you want to get the ending again, but the game knows that you've already beaten it and you can access this thing. So I was, like I said, around level 40 to 42 with all of my party members at this point. Getting through this cave at that level, virtually impossible because it is so long, the enemies are so powerful, you need to really grind up. And based on some research I did, everyone recommends level 60 and above for this part of the game. Yeah, I've mentioned a few times that I enjoy grinding in video games. I do, it is fun for the most part. If I'm stuck at a part where I need to grind, mostly I'll stick on a podcast, sit back and just sort of not really pay that much attention to the game, listen to the podcast and I'm just walking back and forth, getting into battles and levelling up. It's fun. But here, no, I just didn't have it in me because A, time consuming, and B, I just couldn't be arsed, honestly. Because getting up 20 levels by this point would take a considerable amount of time. Now, when you're level 40-ish, to get to the next level, you're looking at least 100,000 experience points. The best part of the game to grind, other than this actual cave, because you'll probably die after a battle or two and then you'll have to start over and go back and it's not really worth it. That would be time consuming in itself. The best part to grind is at Zoma's Castle, where the average battle will get you between 2,000 and 3,000 experience points. 2,000 and 3,000 experience points, aiming for 100,000 at least. Yeah, you're looking at maybe 50 battles before you level up. And that's without, of course, getting Metal Babbles, which will give you 10,000 experience points. But actually being able to kill those before they run away, very difficult. So, you've done it. You've gone through 50 battles, leveled up. One level. 19 more to go. Now you need around 120,000 experience points to level up to the next level. And every time you level up, the amount of experience you need to get to the next one goes up, and up, and up, and you get my point. I know what's at the end, I know what's there waiting for me, and it is really, really cool, because it incorporates something from the next set of games. but I just do not have the time or the patience really to go through that. Maybe one day, maybe if I spend between now and next Dragon Questober just grinding constantly, I might be able to do it, but I'd rather spend my time doing other things, in all honesty. So again, like the Ice Cave in the Game Boy Color game, it's great that this extra content is there if you want it. It's just not for me. And that is Dragon Quest III. Honestly, after playing through 4 versions of the game, I'm still not really sick of it. Last year, all honesty, I half-arsed things. I beat Dragon Quest II on the NES, and I just could not stomach going through it 3 more times in full for the video. So I didn't. Here, I had 0 issues doing one after the other because it is such a fantastic game. And the fact that we have another version of it on the horizon with the HD 2D remake coming out hopefully next year. We haven't had any information for it for a while, hopefully we'll get some soon, and I am expecting a 2024 release. Yeah, I am so hyped to play through this game again with these amazing new graphics that I absolutely love. I love that style from the Octopath Traveler games. It's going to be amazing, and I can't wait to see what new features they might add into the game, maybe new story elements, new post-game content, we don't know. It's going to be awesome, and I cannot wait to play that version of the game. And that's after playing through 4 full versions of the game on multiple different systems within a very short time period as well. That's how good Dragon Quest III is. Like I said, as far as I'm concerned, it's the best RPG on the Nintendo Entertainment System. Not a fan of the Final Fantasy game, so don't go at me for that. When it comes to the Super Nintendo, the Super Famicom, don't know yet. There are still some more Dragon Quest games on there that could beat it out. I know there's Dragon Quest IV for the NES as well, but I've never been that big a fan of that game. Maybe it'll change next year, don't know yet. But yeah, Dragon Quest III is phenomenal. Right now, Dragon Quest XI sitting right at the top of the list in rankings from what I've reviewed for Dragon Questober. Dragon Quest III right below it, followed by Dragon Quest I, and at the bottom Dragon Quest II. Yeah, so definitely play Dragon Quest III. Cannot recommend it enough. And it's great to be able to say any version of the game is worth playing. I know I'm not a big fan of the graphic style and how they go about that on the Switch version, but it's still a fantastic version to play. The Game Boy Color version, still a fantastic version to play. The Super Famicom version, like I said, with an English fan translation, the best version. But you still can't go wrong with the original NES version. The only thing the other games have over it, better visuals and audio, a few tweaks here and there, and around 10 hours shaved off. But you're still going to have tons of fun with that NES version. Dragon Questober III has finally come to an end. I hope you enjoyed watching this video as much as I enjoyed making it, and as much as I enjoyed playing through all the versions of Dragon Quest III. Next year, Dragon Questober IV, I've already begun preparations for it, and of course the main video at the end will be me taking a look at Dragon Quest IV, the original NES version, and the version on the Nintendo DS, as unlike all the other NES versions, this one did not get a Super Famicom or a Game Boy Color port. So yeah, get to look at 2 widely different versions of the game. And while I mentioned I've never been the biggest fan of it, I am looking forward to playing through it again with different eyes and seeing if maybe I enjoy it a lot more now than I did back then. So I'm bigcal, thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.